Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to peel back the layers on something that shapes our world in ways you might not even realize: risk analysis.
So let's start with something super relatable. I mean, you've probably asked yourself this exact question before, right? Especially when you're planning a trip.
Well, believe it or not, that little worry you have, that's actually the very first step in a process that professionals use to tackle some of the biggest challenges on the planet. Turns out, you're more of a risk analyst than you think. Okay, let's dive in.
So how do we do it? Well, we all start by just thinking about what could go wrong. It's the same thing tourists do when they're sizing up a potential trip.
And research shows our brains are pretty good at this. We subconsciously start sorting these worries into different buckets. You know, you've got your financial risks like, oh man, what if this trip costs way more than I planned? Or the classic performance risk, you know the one, where the hotel looks nothing like the brochure. We've all been there.
And then what do? We act. We jump into action. We start using all these little strategies to reduce that risk, right? We read a million reviews, we call up that one friend who's been there, we buy travel insurance. All of it is just to make us feel more confident about our choice. And that right there is the key. This whole thing is risk analysis in its most basic form. You spot a problem, and you do something to make it less bad. Simple.
Okay, so that's a vacation. But what happens when the stakes are, a little higher than a canceled flight or a bad hotel? Let's totally switch gears and look at a scenario where the risks are on a whole other level.
All right, just look at the contrast here. It's pretty wild. On the left, you've got our everyday vacation worries. But on the right, these are the kinds of hazards military personnel might face on a peacekeeping mission. A bad hotel? Try a camp set up in a heavily polluted area. Worried about lost luggage? Now the concern is endemic disease. It really puts things in perspective.
As you can imagine, risk assessment here is just monumentally more complex. I mean, this isn't a 9-to-5 job. Soldiers are exposed to their environment 24/7, and the threats are completely unpredictable. We're talking about things like stumbling upon unreported toxic waste dumps or dealing with sudden outbreaks of local violence. A lot of times, they're going in with very limited intel. The analysis can't just be a one-time thing. It has to be constant, always adapt.
So, with stakes this high, how do you make sure the people doing this analysis are doing it right? How do you keep it responsible? Well, professionals in this field are guided by a core set of principles. Think of it like their professional compass. And these ideas are borrowed from other high-stakes fields like engineering, science, and healthcare.
When you look at the codes of conduct for these pros, you see 5 key pillars emerge. Some are pretty straightforward, like a basic code of conduct. Be honest, be fair. But then you get to things like scientific integrity. That's a huge one. It means you have to use the best evidence you can find. And, this is critical, you have to be upfront about what you don't know. And of course, you stick to what you're actually qualified to do, always remembering that public safety is the #1 priority.
And this quote right here just nails one of the most important ideas: separating your roles. The analyst's job isn't to say what should be done. Their job is to present the facts, the science, as clearly and objectively as they possibly can. They have to make sure their own personal views don't creep in and color the analysis, because other people, the decision makers, are relying on that pure, unvarnished information.
Okay, so we have this solid rule book, these principles that have been around for a long time. But right now, they're being tested in a way we've never seen before. And the reason is AI. Think about it. AI is amazing at crunching insane amounts of data to figure out risks. But here's the problem. A lot of the time, its internal workings are what we call a black box. Even the people who built it can't always explain exactly how it got to an answer. And that's a direct shot at that core principle of transparency we were just talking about. How can you be transparent about something you don't fully understand yourself?
And it gets trickier. Because even when we try to force the AI to explain itself, a whole new problem pops up. The explanation it gives might be too simple. It could gloss over the uncertainties or leave out some really important details. And if it does that, boom, you're violating the principle of scientific integrity. It's a real catch-22.
So this all leads to a massive ethical question. It really makes you think of that fundamental oath in medicine, right? First, do no harm. But how in the world do you program that concept into an algorithm? How do you guarantee that these incredibly powerful AI tools are going to follow our most basic human principles, especially when lives are on the line?
And all of this brings us right to the heart of the matter, to a really big question that people have been debating for a long, long time. Is risk analysis actually a science?
To even start to answer that, we kind of have to broaden our idea of what science is. It's not just about lab coats and beakers. There's this great German concept, Wissenschaft, which basically means any field that's all about systematically finding the most reliable knowledge possible at the time.
That could be physics, sure, but it could also be history or, you guessed it, risk analysis.
Okay, so if we're going to treat this like a science, where do we start? You have to start on solid ground, right? The foundation. And that foundation is evidence, hard data. This is the pure, objective, fact-based part of the whole thing. We're just gathering the raw materials from experiments, from observations, from studies, before we try to build anything with it.
Okay, so you've got your raw materials, the evidence. The next step is for experts to use that evidence to build a knowledge base. You can think of this as the organized, assembled understanding of the topic. It's basically the collection of statements and facts that most experts in that field would look at and say, yep, that's what we know to be true right now.
All right, now pay attention, because this next step is where everything changes. This is the big pivot. That solid knowledge base gets evaluated. And this is the exact moment where the hard, objective facts meet our messy, subjective human values. This is where science has to help us answer a question that science alone can't answer. How safe is safe enough?
And finally, that evaluation, the blend of facts and values, is what informs the actual decision. And that final choice, whether it's approving a new drug, deciding to build a bridge, or, hey, even just booking that vacation, it's ultimately a judgment call. It's a choice made based on the values and priorities we decided were important.
So what's the big takeaway here? Is risk analysis a science? Yes, but it's a really special kind of science. It's the science that acts as a bridge. It's the one that formally connects the clean, objective world of facts with the messy, subjective world of our human values. It gives us a framework to have that incredibly important conversation.
At the end of the day, this whole thing isn't about getting rid of risk completely. Because let's be real, that's impossible. It's about understanding it, managing it, and making smarter choices because of it. So that leaves us with one final thought for you. Now that you know that every big decision you make is this blend of facts and values, how are you going to approach the next one?